Basil Borutski has been found guilty of murdering 3 of his former partners in a shocking one-day killing spree in Renfrew County, ONT. That's been called one of the worst cases of domestic violence in Canadian history. A jury of 6 men and 5 women returned guilty verdicts on 2 counts of first-degree and 1 count of second-degree murder just after 2:30 p.m. Friday. Borutski, 60, refused to stand as the Madam Foreperson of the jury read the verdicts. Guilty of first-degree murder in the shootings of Anastasia Kuzyk and Nathalie Warmerdam at their homes in Wilno and Foymount, and guilty of second-degree murder in the strangling of Carol Culleton at her cottage near Combermere. His sentencing has been scheduled for Dec. 5 to 6 at the courthouse in Pembroke, ONT. Borutski remained silent over the 7 weeks of proceedings against him, but broke that silence about halfway through Ontario Superior Court Justice Robert Maranger's instructions to the jury Wednesday to accuse the judge of lying, and Borutski spoke again after the jury retired to deliberate. "I'm not guilty," he said, pulling on his green coat in the prisoner's box. The jury determined otherwise after about 14 hours of deliberations over 3 days. This is what happened. At 7:36 a.m. on Sept. 22, 2015, Borutski walked out of his apartment at 5967 Palmer Road in Palmer Rapids, ONT, in a camouflage hat and pants, as if he were going hunting. He had with him a decades-old, sawed-off 12-gauge pump-action shotgun he later told police he'd found under the floorboards of an old motorhome in a scrap yard. He borrowed a neighbor's car and drove to a gas station just up the road. The gas light was on and he needed to fuel up, but the station was closed. After sitting there in the parking lot for a time, he drove next to a cottage owned by Culleton at 670 Kemanaskeg Lake Road, near Combermere, ONT, a short trip, about 15 minutes northwest. He called her Jiggy, Jig for Fisher. He would later tell police, hours after her murder, "Here's the bait. Take the bait away. Here's the bait. Take the bait away. I told her, that's the way you treat me." Carol, single quote. They'd been in a relationship a couple years back, and in early 2015 he popped up in her life again, offering to help get her cottage ready to sell. She was close to retiring from her work as a pay analyst for the Federal Public Service. Her longtime partner had died of cancer, and she was looking to downsize. Borutski told her he was bored and needed something to do. It would be cheap. She'd save some money. But it didn't take long for the renewed friendship to sour, for his behavior to become strange and worrisome. Culleton told friends and colleagues she was annoyed with how he'd start new projects she didn't ask for without finishing others, and that she was starting to feel like the cottage wasn't hers anymore. He made a habit of showing up unannounced, tore up flowers he planted after she sat on another man's knee a couple weeks before her murder, and gave her a shock by showing up at her house in rural South Ottawa. She was sure she hadn't given him the address, but he told her it was on a card she'd given him once. "I said, Carol, you've got a stalker. He's stalking you," her friend Nathalie testified. The text messages between them bore out Borutski's desperation, his need to control Culleton, his wish for her to see him in a certain light. In the 2 weeks leading up to her murder, he sent her more than 100 messages. She sent only 15 in reply. It came to a head the weekend of her retirement, the weekend before her killing. She had reunited with her boyfriend and asked Borutski to stop bothering her. It stung him to the quick, and he sent more than a dozen unanswered texts begging for an explanation, to talk, to be friends. He showed up at the cottage on Monday, the day before he murdered her, and she told her friend Nathalie that Borutski was very upset and collecting his things. Borutski's last texts to Culleton were sent around 6 p.m. that day. When he arrived at the cottage the next morning, Culleton was alone. The following is Borutski's own account of what happened, taken from the 5-hour interview he gave to OPPDET Sergeant Kaylee O'Neill the day after his arrest. And I remember thinking that God is really helping me, because when I went to Carol walked right outside, and then I asked her. I said, "Why do you hate me?" Or, "Why are you doing this to me?" Or both. Borutski said. And then she closed the door. I was right there. And then I broke the window with my elbow and I reached in and I unlocked the door. And she said, "This is not you, Basil. This not you." Single quote. Then she told me that a man was coming over because the hydro was out. And I said, "You're lying to me again." And there was a cable TV coil. I picked it up and I hit her with it. Then I wrapped it around her head. And she just kept saying, "This is not you, Basil. This is not you." Single quote.